This is Contrazoom.
Where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different to the previous ones. As we're getting closer and closer to the end of 2022 and into the holiday season, we decided to keep things a little bit light, a little bit fun here. Not that they're not always fun, obviously. So what we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be playing a little game called This or That. It's going to be a movie director edition. Not an original game, obviously. We've lifted it from other podcasts and interviews and things like that. But before we jump into it, Dakota, how are you? Are you into the festive spirit yet?
Sure, why not? I feel like you've maybe been in lockdown too long because you said as we approach the end of 2022.
Oh, did I say that?
You did, yes. So I think you should get out of your house every once in a while, Rachel, and realize it's still actually only 2021.
Oh, man. Yeah. What is time and space anymore, honestly?
Who knows? You know, before we start recording, we were talking about Loki, so, you know, maybe you're just on one of those time continuums.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm very excited about this. I know this is something that you would propose to me I don't want to say a few months ago, but definitely more than a month ago. You're like, would you be up for this? I was like, yeah, you know, we got nothing going on before Christmas, and I would like it if we sort of not have to do where I watch 10 films by a director like I just did for the Wes Anderson one, where that takes up a lot of time and energy. And so you proposed, I was like, yeah, this sounds like fun. And then I expected it to be a little bit of both of us going back and forth. And you're like, no, I want to do this. I was like, okay, so you're in control of this episode. I have literally no idea what's coming up.
Yeah, so that's kind of the fun bit of this is Dakota has no idea what I've prepared for this whatsoever. It's trust. That's trust.
So,
that's
dear listener, it's been wonderful knowing you.
Okay, so the way that I figured we would do this, rather than just a cut and dry, pick one movie that you like better, or kind of the ever popular, only pick one and then the other movie it no longer exists kind of thing, I thought that's a bit harsh. So what I thought we would do is imagine you're meeting a person or an alien, if you will, someone who has no idea about this director or any, like who they are, their style, their tone, whatever, any type of movie that they've done. And I'm going to give you two titles from their filmography, and you're going to pick the movie that you think is the best one to introduce a complete newbie to this particular director. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I think that's a great idea because very often I can acknowledge that my favorite doesn't necessarily line up with maybe what would be either the most accessible or the best overview of someone's vision.
Part of the reason that I went this route was because I've mined Dakota's Letterboxd, which has a lot of lists, like a lot of ranked directors lists. Also, give Dakota a follow on Letterboxd. There's a little plug for you. I think it's just your name, right? It's just Dakota Arsenault.
I think my actual account is DGAPA, which is what my personal social media accounts are.
Oh, just letting that fly out there. Just letting everyone know.
It's okay. It's okay. My Instagram is private anyway, so you know they could try to follow me, and I'll
get
either accept or decline depending on if I actually know them.
So I figured I already know like the way that you've ranked them. I know which one that you prefer over another because you've ranked them. So, and I can see your ratings and you've reviewed a lot of them. So I thought we'll take it a different way. And like you said, like a movie that is your favorite isn't necessarily the best of a director or the director that encompasses what they're about. And you are obviously, like you just said, it's like you're objective enough to understand that versus thinking that your favorite is obviously the be all and end all. So I've got a list of directors, and I've also played a little game with myself here, which I've highlighted the movie that I think you're going to pick just to make it a little interesting for me.
Interesting. Okay.
So I'm going to start with director you just mentioned, which is Wes Anderson. So you did a ranked with Steph, which was episode 175. So you've gone over all of his filmography, including The French Dispatch. So the two movies I picked from Mr. Anderson are The Royal Tenenbaums and Rushmore.
Oh, okay.
And you could even do that for me, because I've seen both of them, I think, but I'm not the biggest Wes Anderson fan, so convince me.
I think the correct answer really is the Royal Tenenbaums. I prefer Rushmore over it, but Royal Tenenbaums was really the big mainstream. No, sorry, it was really the indie breakthrough for Anderson.
Yeah.
As I've mentioned before, Grand Budapest Hotel was probably his mainstream breakthrough, but I would say the Royal Tenenbaums was the one that really put him on the map for people to see. It is sort of where his career was sort of going. Rushmore mostly is a 2/3-hander where you've got Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray sort of butting heads against each other, and then you've got the love interest of Olivia Williams sort of off to the side a little bit where the two of them are competing for her. Whereas Royal Tenenbaums, is sort of what he's become known for, of these large, expansive ensemble casts. And so you try to pick a lead out of Royal Tenenbaums, and it's like, well, is it Gene Hackman, since it's really him trying to get the family back together? Is it one of the three siblings of Ben Stiller, Luke Wilson, or Gwyneth Paltrow sort of thing? Is it Angelica Houston, who kind of controls the family? There's a lot of different dynamics going on, but it really sort of highlights what Wes Anderson at his best really does well. And that's sort of taking these deeply sad and troubled people and bringing humor to the screen, even though we understand that they're going through an immense amount of personal pain, or sometimes actual physical pain as well, in the case of some of the characters. But it's also really funny. You also get sort of the trademark Wes Anderson-y shots where, you get the long tracking shots, the slow-mo, the color coordinating outfits to the backgrounds, the very unique look to everything. So you get a little bit of everything that Wes Anderson's known for. Like I said, I do prefer Rushmore a bit more because it's both sadder and funnier, but I think Royal Tenenbaums is probably a great introduction for people.
Awesome. See, I'm glad we started off with Wes Anderson. I figured you'd have a very strong and eloquent opinion on it, which you did.
Thank you, because I just talked about, so all my notes are fresh.
And I was going to say, you just watched all of his movies, which is a lot of work, I will say. Even for a director that you like, it's still a lot of work to sit through everything.
Would you agree with me on that?
I picked Royal Tenenbaums. I said that was the one that you were going to pick, and I actually do agree with that as well. I think Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums, I think the thing you said about the ensemble, that to me is like a very big thing on Wes Anderson. It's like having these massive, massive ensembles of actors and kind of fitting in storylines for everybody. And also the style of it, I think, is quite quintessential Wes Anderson. So yeah, I'm 1 for 1 in my game. That's for my own personal thing. I don't know why I have to make everything a competition, but okay.
It's the sports fan in you.
Oh no, it's terrible, isn't it? It's honestly terrible. All right, so West Side Story has come out now, and so we're going to go Steven Spielberg. So Steven Spielberg is really difficult to do because he is obviously he's got a million credits to his name, and he's been working for so long. So to define what a Spielberg movie is, to me, is kind of difficult because I don't think he has a Spielberg movie. But I've chosen two of his big movies. They're all pretty big. But I went Saving Private Ryan and Jaws.
Okay. Ooh, that's tough.
It's tough. Spielberg's a really difficult one, I have to say.
Yeah, his career is so all over the place. He's done a lot of different genre films, and so you're comparing a war film to a quasi thriller horror drama movie, and they're so widely different. And you look through Spielberg's career, and you can put them into a whole bunch of different silos of different styles of films that he's made, other than musical, which West Side Story is his first one, and comedy. I think he's only ever really made 2 real comedies, and that's Catch Me If You Can in 1941. So he's kind of mostly on the drama side. And then you get his lazy period where it's clearly paycheck jobs for some of the stuff that he's done. So yeah, he's such an interesting person. I've considered doing a ranked series on him where I would basically go in increments of 10 of his movies, but that's so much because he's done, I think this is now his 28th or 29th film, so it's almost at 30, which is pretty crazy. But to the question at hand, Jaws or Saving Private Ryan, I adore both of these movies. Saving Private Ryan's probably top 3 war movies ever made.
Agreed.
In my opinion. The Omaha beach landing is just pure perfection, but the rest of the movie is so good as well. But Jaws, yeah, I love Jaws. I adore it so much. I think I'm going to have to go with Jaws. And the reason why I think it's a better introduction to Spielberg, despite the fact that he's only maybe done 2 or 3 other close to scary-ish movies. I would maybe put something like War of the Worlds up there. AI, artificial intelligence, despite not being a horror movie, really kind of like gets into your soul with some of the questions that it asks you about, like, what does time mean, which that always kind of messes with me a little bit. Maybe that's why I love a ghost story so much. But what I think Jaws does better and makes it more Steven Spielberg-y is the daddy issues. and the family drama that's been really at the center of Spielberg's entire career through almost all of his films. You know, he apparently had a terrible relationship with his dad growing up, where he left his mother and started a new family, and then they didn't reconnect until he was like in his like late 20s or something like that, and he finally kind of understood what happened with his parents, the sort of full story. But by then, he kind of made his career on mostly about children feeling abandoned by their parents. You know, that's a really big theme in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where that's basically the whole story is either kids being abducted or their parents running away from them, sort of thing. But Jaws kind of does that as well. Obviously, it's very much centered on 3 men trying to find a shark and kill it, but there is that element of family drama as well. And it might just be one of the best purely made movies ever. Ranking Spielberg, obviously, I put Jaws above Saving Private Ryan. So there you go. I
also picked Jaws for you. I thought he's going to go with Jaws. Yeah,
I adore Jaws. I have several Jaws T-shirts, and every time I see a Jaws T-shirt in stores, I look at it, and my wife is always like, "Really, another one?"
It's funny because you're not into like horror movies. Although this isn't, I wouldn't consider this like a classically horror movie. It is scary.
No, it's got horror elements, but yeah.
It's terrifying though. But the movie I thought Jaws is very similar to in Spielberg's filmography is Duel, like the first movie he ever did. Like you can see hints of what he was about to do with Jaws, like an unseen villain. It's like this kind of, it's very tense the whole time, and not so much the family, like the daddy issue aspect to it. That's not included in Duel whatsoever. I think this is a bit of an unfair question, because I think you can divide Spielberg's career into silos, as you said. Like, these 2 movies are about 20 years apart, I think. And a lot can happen in 20 years, and he's obviously going to be a very different filmmaker. But for me, I think Jaws is a really good movie to introduce him to like the first half of his career. And then Saving Private Ryan to me is more akin to what Spielberg would be in the back half of his career, or the back end.
Especially, the big budget spectacle and things like that. Yeah,
like the big prestige drama, which nobody can touch Spielberg as far as I'm concerned. I think he's the best at that. And I'm not like overly keen to watch West Side Story, to be honest, but since the reviews have come out for it and everyone's saying like this is a really great Spielberg picture, it makes me more interested to see it. And actually thinking about Saving Private Ryan made me be like, I kind of want to see him do West Side Story, because I know that he's obviously one of the best when it comes to just these really massive scale films, which I think West Side Story is going to end up being. So yeah, I don't personally have a pick between the 2, but I did say you would pick Jaws.
Yeah, West Side Story is an interesting one because I'm not a big musical person. The original, I've watched it a few times, and like every time that like opening dance sequence happens, song and dance sequence happens, I'm always like, I hate musicals. And then like for some reason, I'm able to just sort of get myself immersed into it, and I think the filmmaking of it is so good, especially the like school dance scene is just like one of the most beautiful sequences ever shot to film. I fall so much in love with that movie by the time, like after the first 10 minutes, I really get into it, and I sort of am able to accept the musical nature of it, which I know is a pretty hot take. So I'm worried a little bit about the Spielberg version. So I hope it's as beautiful, but like just going because it's a musical, that doesn't interest me.
I agree with that. I like, we actually just talked about this. Like, I have a very love-hate relationship with musicals. Sometimes some of them I really do enjoy. Some of them can be really well done, but a lot of them, it's just, I don't know. It's a bit of a slog to get through.
Yeah.
But neither here or there. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go from, I think, everyone's favorite director, which is Spielberg. I think that's a pretty safe favorite director choice. Your favorite director, Wes Anderson, and to my favorite working director, Denis Villeneuve. So I went with Sicario and Dune.
That's pretty easy for me.
You like Sicario better, I would think.
I do. I like Sicario a lot better. And this maybe is also a bit of an interesting one where looking at Villeneuve's career, he sort of has now had three sort of very distinct phases. The first section would be his career in Quebec, his French-Canadian films, which I've only seen Antionette, which calling that a French-Canadian film is a bit of a stretch because it takes place in the Middle East as well, mostly. But, you know, outside of Farsi, I believe French is the next most predominant language in that movie. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But I haven't seen the rest of his French-Canadian films, so I can't really talk too much about them. And then he has this really interesting middle period where he does stuff like Sicario and Enemy and Prisoners. And that sort of trifecta of films, he really sort of... It's almost like early David Fincher, where he's like able to get really gritty with his crime dramas and thrillers and really burrow deep into the psychology of these characters and get some really interesting stuff. Sicario is an interesting one because I had come off seeing Antionette and absolutely loved it. It was probably one of my favorite films of that year. Prisoners, I really, really enjoyed. And then Sicario, the trailer came out, and I was like, this movie looks so overly preachy and ridiculous. Like, I can't imagine enjoying this at all. And I watched it, and I was just absolutely blown away by it. And it sort of made me realize, I'm like, hey, okay, I sort of thought the Prisoners trailer was a little off, too. Maybe whoever makes Villeneuve's trailers just doesn't get his style, because... More often than not, his movies are so heady and psychological, it's hard to really capture their essence in a 2-minute trailer. So you go with, you know, the crazy action scenes and some of the cheesy dialogue, or what seems to be cheesy dialogue, and sort of trying to really do that. And then you watch it and you get... if I was a regular movie watcher, I would be so disappointed. Like, this isn't what the trailer was. I expected this crazy shoot 'em up, you know, Mexican border gang drug war sort of movie, and it really isn't. It really ends up being this exploration into the accountability and culpability of the U.S. government into the drug trade and who finances who and who's at the bottom of that. But the movie gets really dark. You know, there's this... I don't want to spoil too much about it for people who haven't seen it, but there's this early scene when they... raid a house. Emily Blunt's character and her team raid this house, and what they discover in this house might be one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen on film, and one of the few times where you can actually smell a movie, and it's so dark and disturbing sort of thing. Dune, on the other hand, I think is really fun, but it's in this sort of now new chapter of his career where he's basically Christopher Nolan light, where, you know, Blade Runner 2049 and now Dune, he's got these big budget spectacles and he's basically carrying on franchises. And I sort of want to see him return back to his smaller roots. Word is, for a few years now, he's been trying to work on an adaptation of Cleopatra. And I'd be very curious to see what he does with that. Is that going to be more Elizabeth Taylor Cleopatra, or is it going to be more like Enemy, Sicario, Prisoners, Cleopatra, where it's much more contained in a smaller, intimate story sort of thing? So I'm very interested to sort of see where he goes. But as someone who's only moderately okay with Dune, Sicario is definitely the way to go if you really want to see what Denis Villeneuve can do best.
See, I would say... I agree with you. I think of those two, Sicario is probably the one that is more Villeneuve-y, to me, though, I mean, this is me predicting, like just making a hypothetical prediction of the future. I get the feeling Dune is going to be the movie that this is where his career is going. Like, as much as I agree with you, I'd like to see him go back and do some of the smaller stuff. I have a feeling this is the direction his career is going to take him. And maybe he'll go back to the smaller stuff, but like in 10 years or something like that. Like, it's going to be a while before.
Or like in a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, Dune should have been a TV series, let's be honest now, because that could have been a really cool TV series. But yeah, I think I agree with you on your Sicario points, but like, there's a part of me that just says I feel like Dune is going to be this is what we're going to see from him for the rest, not the rest of his career, but I think for the bulk of his career, it's going to be the Dunes and the Blade Runner 2049s. Like, I don't know if his, going to make another Polytechnique or another Ensemble anytime soon, which is a shame because I think those are fantastic, fantastic movies. But Dune is also great. I really like Dune. I like Dune more than you did. But yeah, I think it's really good, and I'm looking forward to the second part. Okay.
Yes, I am looking forward to it as well. I want to see how this ends.
Where it started from where it ended. You mentioned the Cleopatra thing, so they are doing another Cleopatra next year, or not next year, next year I think. And Gal Gadot.
Yeah, I heard it. Someone else's. Yeah.
It's going to be Kate.
Is Patty Jenkins involved in it?
She's producing, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think Kate Shortland was announced to do the direction of it, who was the director of Black Widow, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I read a book about Cleopatra a little while ago, and it was like the most intense Cleopatra book I've ever read in my life. It's a fascinating story, and I would have loved to have seen Denis' kind of vision on that, but I highly doubt he's going to get a chance anytime soon, because why are they going to make...
I'm looking it up on IMDb, and the trivia says, this film version shouldn't be mistaken for the one being produced by Sony Pictures with director Denis Villeneuve. This film version from Paramount Pictures is based on a historical mythology, while Sony's take is based on the Stacy Schiff biography.
They're doing 2 Cleopatras within like a very short time?
Yes. What's that term called? Or it's like 2 movies that seem similar. It's like movie twins or movie doubles or something like that. So like stuff like Ants in a Bug's Life.
Or what was it? I always think of Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Deep Impact, yeah. Or The Prestige and The Illusionist,
yes,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the difference being that this is 2 films of the same character, so that'll be interesting. It's almost like when 2 movies were made out of Truman Capote within a year. There's the one with Philip Seymour Hoffman, and then I can't remember who is in the other one, but they came out very, very close together, and obviously the other one got completely overshadowed.
I would think like TV as well, like 30 Rock and Sorkin's one,
Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
I love that show. I liked both. I like 30 Rock as well, but I really like Sunset 60. That was a really, really good TV show. Okay, well, we'll look out for Denis' Cleopatra. I think that would be good.
It'll probably be better.
Probably. I don't want to discount Kate Shortland, but probably it will be better. Okay, let's move to, I know a film director you really love, Sofia Coppola. So I chose Marie Antoinette and The Bling Ring.
Interesting. Interesting that you picked 2 of her films that she's maybe not the most known for. I guess maybe Marie Antoinette, but those are interesting ones to pick. Huh.
See, if you include Lost in Translation, then the answer is Lost in Translation.
Yeah, because I would say Lost in Translation and The Virgin Suicides are probably like the 2 movies she's most known for and has had the most acclaim.
Absolutely.
And then Marie Antoinette's probably, maybe 3rd on that list, but I think she's only made like 5 movies, so it's really hard to make a very long list and be like, yes, it's the 3rd most popular one. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think I would go with Marie Antoinette. I think I like them about the same, but Marie Antoinette does a little bit of a better job of not being a time capsule of when it was made. Because even though the Bling Ring was made a couple years after the events took place, it still very much was grounded in that era, and it almost looks a little dated with the clothes, the music, the look of everything, the technology, and not in a way of like, oh, hey, we made this movie about 2008, 20 years later, and so everyone kind of looks that way, like maybe something like The Big Short, where they do a pretty good job of making everyone look that era appropriate. Marie Antoinette obviously is a period piece, but what Sofia Coppola is so well known for is sort of like her needle drops, and obviously Bling Ring has that, but I think Marie Antoinette does it a bit better. Kirsten Dunst, I think, is so interconnected with the mythology of Sofia Coppola, and so her starring in that is probably something that connects that well. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think Marie Antoinette's probably the more generally liked one, and probably a better introduction to the whimsy that Sofia Coppola can have, while also having like a unique take on female characters. So I would probably go with that. Whereas because the Bling Ring is mostly has a male perspective from the lead, I think she actually does better with someone like Kirsten Dunst as her muse.
That's really interesting. I did pick Marie Antoinette for you. So far, 4 for 4, picking what Dakota would
Great.
pick.
You know me very well.
Also, just fun fact, you did rank both of them at number 4, or rate both of them with 4 stars on Letterboxd. So you do like them pretty equally. Yeah.
I really like Sofia Coppola.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm not the massive, huge on her. I like Lost in Translation a lot. I think that's a great movie. I haven't been sold on any of her other stuff, though, if I'm honest. Like, nothing makes me jump out and be like, oh, I want to watch more of her work. Virgin Suicides, I wanted to love a lot, because I really like the book, Virgin Suicides. And I think she does a good job, but not quite exactly my thing, I guess. And so it's interesting that I would actually probably choose Bling Ring between the two as a way of introducing Sofia Coppola. I feel like that is a bit more of an accessible movie for people to kind of like get into Sofia Coppola. I also thought what was interesting you said about one of them. So Bling Ring was obviously shot during the time that, close enough anyways to when it happened, whereas Marie Antoinette obviously is a long time ago. Whereas one looks dated and the other one just looks period appropriate. And this is an off comment just about the way movies are done. Like, if you're filming in that time period, you might not capitalize on the things that are stereotypical to the period because you're just shooting a movie. Whereas something like, I think if you were to do a movie about the 90s now, people would really push like what people look like, quote unquote, look like in the 90s, but it's almost stereotypical because that's a part of the movie. Whereas I don't think in Bling Ring they were thinking we need to be era appropriate, because they were just like, oh, it just happened, like you said, like a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a side point.
Yeah, and I feel bad that I have to admit that I've never seen The Virgin Suicides or Somewhere. Those are the only 2 movies of hers I haven't seen. And I know I really do need to rectify that. But you really need to watch The Beguiled. I've been telling you for a while you should watch that. Yeah. I think that might be her best one.
Okay. Even better than Lost in Translation?
It's up there for sure.
Really?
I adore Lost in Translation. It's pretty fantastic, but The Beguiled is a really fantastic thriller, kind of gothic thriller-ish. Yeah.
Okay. I will watch it before the end of the year. How about that? I promise.
Oh, thank you. Especially since we both liked oh wow, I'm blanking on the name of that movie where we interviewed the director earlier this year.
Oh, Glass House?
Yes, Glass House. It's very similar to Glass House.
All right, let's wrap up on the last one. This could be the 5th one. Which one do I want to do? Okay, I was going to do Miyazaki, but I'm actually going to go with something kind of similar-ish to Spielberg, which is David Fincher. Okay. The reason I say similar-ish to Spielberg is just that I think you can divide Fincher's career as well, so I'd be interested to see where you go. The 2 movies I've chosen for Fincher are Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons and Fight Club.
I think that's pretty easy. Fight Club.
See, the reason I put them up is because I feel like Fincher gets the reputation of making really cold movies, right? Like that's kind of a thing that a lot of people criticize him for. But Benjamin Button's is not cold in the slightest. And I would say, I think on balance, Fight Club is a better movie. But Benjamin Button showcases a side of Fincher that is not the stereotypical Fincher. So I guess it kind of comes down to which side of Fincher would you want to introduce somebody to?
Yeah, I agree. I think, when I did the David Fincher ranked episode, I sort of realized that he's not someone I love as much as I thought I did. The Social Network will always be one of the greatest films ever made with one of the greatest scripts ever made. But yeah, Fight Club. Fight Club is an interesting one because every once in a while I'll be like, yeah, I don't really care for Fight Club. And then I'll get around to rewatching. I'm like, no, you know what actually is really good. And then I'll kind of be like, nah, I don't know. It's sort of the discourse where like, is it toxic masculinity? Is it anti-toxic masculinity? Is it anti-toxic masculinity? Where like, it's always this like really stupid argument about what that film actually is. And like, I think sometimes now we're at the point where people are over-analyzing it, where it's just like, it seems like it's pretty clearly against the toxic masculinity and the consumerism of the world. Like, I think that's pretty clear, and you don't really need to analyze it any deeper than that. And that was something that I realized when watching Fincher's movies, is they're not as deep as they could be, perhaps. He's a very surface level director, and you watch it and you're like, oh, great. So the theme of this movie is greed. That's it. There's nothing else to it. That's just greed or whatever you want to describe some of his different films and things like that. And I feel like a pretty common criticism of Benjamin Button is that, one, it's too long and too spread out, and so that doesn't work. And two, the levity of it just doesn't really suit Fincher, and it sort of seems a little out of place at times. And you wonder if maybe there's someone else involved with it, and so it doesn't always feel like a David Fincher movie. But like, if you want to look at what David Fincher is best at, and that is really gritty crime films, you've got like Fight Club and Seven and Gone Girl and The Game, if you're one of the people that enjoy that movie. What he does best is really delving into the psyche of damaged and deranged people, and Fight Club is just about the best of that.
Fair. I also picked that you would select Fight Club. Boom. Done. Okay, so I think we did 5, and I think that's like a good number to round off at. However, I'm going to throw one bonus at you, and it's not, I love it, yeah. I didn't pick 2 movies.
Keep it coming.
Because I couldn't pick 2 movies, quite frankly. So I'm going to just say to you, pick one movie. If you were to introduce somebody to Alfred Hitchcock, which movie would it be? It's tough to pick 2 movies for him. So of all of his entire filmography, and I did write down a guess that I had for you. But it is a bit of a just, a guess. So of all the Hitchcock movies you have seen, which one do you think best encapsulates the Alfred Hitchcock persona that you would want to introduce to somebody who's never heard of Alfred Hitchcock?
That's an interesting one. According to my Letterboxd, I've seen 21 of his films.
Yeah, you've seen a lot.
Yeah, and so he's an interesting one because like he's got like about like 4 or 5 absolutely stone cold classics that are in the pantheon of, if you were to make a Mount Rushmore of films, you could make all 4 films Alfred Hitchcock films, and you'd be right in doing so. Yeah. And then he's got like a small handful of ones that are like really beloved because they're really great genre films, and then he's got this entire world of movies that just seem to be forgotten by the general movie-going populace, where they're just never talked about. And there's some really good ones. There's some stinkers in there, or some ones that just really don't work or really don't provide the thrills you would expect from an Alfred Hitchcock film. But there's some great ones in there. So that's a tough one, because like I personally am a really big fan of a movie called I Confess, which stars Montgomery Clift as a priest who witnesses a crime, and he has to figure out someone confesses to him a crime, and he has to decide whether or not he breaks the oath of confession to bring justice, or if he keeps his priestly duties of not revealing what he hears in confession, sort of thing. And it's a fantastic, really great little piece about Montgomery Clift really sort of fighting within himself of what he should do. But that's besides the point, because I wouldn't recommend that as a starting point for Alfred Hitchcock, because that makes no sense to start with that movie when you've got movies like Psycho and Vertigo and Rear Window and North by Northwest and Rebecca. To really, I would say those are, would you agree that those are like the 5 main ones, that that's what you would like sort of argue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like he's got, like you said, there's so many to choose from, and they're all very good, and they all kind of touch on a different side of Hitchcock as a man, I think. And that's why I find director filmographies really interesting, is like you can kind of track the growth and or sometimes not growth of a person. Like Scorsese, I think his filmography is really, really good. In that sense, like you can track where he is in his life, and like what he's thinking about, what's concerning him. Hitchcock, I think, is similar. But I would say, those 5 are definitely his big ones. And like one of my favorite, I like Rope a lot. I know that I think you ranked that a little bit lower on your list. But I really love Rope. I found that one to be fascinating. So, but if you had to pick one, just to say, here, person A, you're going to start off with this one, and this is what best encapsulates who Hitchcock is as a director.
Before I get to that, I would say that your comparison to Scorsese is a really good one, because both of them seem to be known for one style of film. Mm-hmm. When in reality, you look at their filmographies, they're so different. Like, you think Scorsese, you think gangster movie. And then you look through his movie, and he's done like period pieces, and he's done romance, he's done comedy, he's done musicals, like he's all over the place. But what he's mostly known for is gangster movies. Yeah. And Hitchcock is sort of the same way, where it's murder mystery. That's what he's known for. But you look through his filmography, and it really varies. Now, I will give into the conceit that 95% of his movies sort of center around a murder, but he goes about them in very different ways.
Yeah, he does. No, it's like I Confess is a great like example of that. I think like it's about a murder, but it's not like a whodunit. It's not a thriller-y. I mean, it kind of is, but like that's not the focus of the movie.
Yeah, it's about one man sort of trying to grapple with what to do.
Yeah, which is very different to something like Psycho, which is also about a murder.
Yes. So I would throw out Vertigo. I would not recommend that one. That one is like, you got to be well versed in your cinema to be able to sit through that one. It's very long. It basically repeats the movie twice. You really have to be paying attention to the small details. And if you're not ready for that, it's not going to be for you. This is not his blockbuster film. This is his art house indie film sort of thing. So I would not recommend Vertigo to people. North by Northwest, I'm not as high of it. Oh, I would even also include The Birds as maybe a top 6. Both North by Northwest and The Birds, I'm not really as high on. The humor in North by Northwest is a little too cheesy for me, in double entendre and innuendo filled, which is sort of what he was known for, but like it's a little too much for me. And The Birds, I think, is just a little too cheesy overall, despite the fact that it has some really interesting and great set pieces. So The Birds I would consider, even though I'm not a fan of it. What it comes down to for me is Psycho and Rear Window. Now, the issue is Psycho is a pure horror movie, and he didn't really do any other pure horror movies. Everything else is more of a mystery, a drama, a thriller, a caper, those adjacent genres of suspense. But Psycho is the only one that's like an actual pure horror movie. And if you were to say, hey, watch this movie, this is one of the greatest horror movies ever made, the problem is this director didn't do anything else like this. So it's a little tough. Mm-hmm. I think I would settle on Rear Window as being possibly the best introduction to him, just because it's a style that he has done many times in terms of, it's a mystery, it's a thriller, it's very suspenseful. You get this great it's also one of these things where you're questioning the identity of what's even happening the whole time, where you're like, did he really witness his neighbor murder his wife, or like we're led to believe it's all, in his head. It's all paranoia because Jimmy Stewart's character is stuck in a wheelchair this whole time, and he's bored and he's making up scenarios in his head. But we also get like this fantastic set, one of the best like in studio sets ever made, this apartment complex. Absolutely adore what he did with it. And the fact that he's able to make basically a single location movie this exciting just shows how great Hitchcock was. So I'm going to go with Rear Window on this.
I'm so proud of myself that I picked Rear Window for you.
Oh, nice.
I completely agree.
I am very high on it too.
It's not even just that it's one of the best movies to show about Alfred Hitchcock. It's just one of those, it's like exactly what you said. Story-wise, it's flawless. Like it's such an interesting concept for a story, but the way that he shot it to me is like nothing short of brilliant. And if you want to see Hitchcock at his absolute best on both sides of it, I think you don't get better than Rear Window. Like I love Vertigo. Vertigo is actually probably my favorite Hitchcock movie. I think Vertigo is my favorite, but I agree. It can be a bit daunting maybe to watch as your
tedious.
First. Yeah, like I kind of get it. Like if you're not a fan of Hitchcock, if you don't get Hitchcock's thing, then Vertigo can be a bit like, okay, like what's going on here? Like it's just going and going and going, seemingly like never ending. But Rear Window it's streamlined, it's effective, it's incredibly well shot, and I completely agree with you about it being one of the best set designs that has ever been made. Like it's incredible. Like I remember the first time I watched it being pretty blown away, like just looking at the different like apartment windows and everything that was going on in them. And funny enough, so there was like a Simpsons episode that they did the send up of Rear Window. I think it was Bart has
yes,
he broke his leg on the trampoline. He
breaks his leg when he tries to dive into a pool or something like that.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I watched that before I watched Rear Window.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I saw that when I was young. And I was watching Rear. I'm like,
I probably did too, actually.
And you're like, oh, that's where that's from. I've had a lot of that with Simpsons, where I watched The Simpsons before I watched the actual thing that they were talking about, and then getting very like, oh, they're just copying The Simpsons, and it's like, oh wait, no, that's not the case. But yeah, I watched Rear Window, and then I was just like, oh, that's what this Simpsons episode was about. Like, I get that now. Awesome. I feel very proud of myself. I picked one out of all. Like, I don't know if I'm sure people would disagree with the Hitchcock one and say maybe Psycho is the better one, or I'm sure some people might even say Vertigo, because Vertigo does do a lot of Hitchcockian things, but it's not as stomachable, I suppose, as a film. But I would agree with you about Rear Window. I think I agree with most of your choices. I'd say the only one maybe
was Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve, yeah, and that even the Spielberg one, I might disagree with that one, because I actually think Saving Private Ryan is more into. It's kind of like the director that they were versus the director that they wanted to be, almost. And I feel like with Spielberg for Saving Private Ryan, that was like a sweet spot in his career where he got to do everything that he wanted to do. And I'd say the same for Denis and Dune. Like, this is the time that he gets to do what he wants to do. And thereby makes the movie that should, theoretically, best encompass who he is. How'd you find that as a little game?
That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I think you did a great job with that. And obviously you clearly know me very well. Whether that was from, doing this podcast now for well over a year with me, or scrolling through my letterbox and reading my very personal diary entries.
Your reviews are great on Letterboxd, I would say. I've said this to you before.
Are they?
I think you should write more, but that's just me. I said that to you before. Yeah, that's awesome. I enjoyed that. That was great. And I like it too, because you're always the one with like the better know contributor and things like that. It's like you're the one that gets to ask the questions to other people. So I think it's fun that somebody else gets to actually dive into your psyche a little bit about movies and get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you doing this. That was a lot of fun. And hopefully we can maybe do this again another time. Maybe I'll have to turn the tables on you and try to figure that out, which is basically like me having to learn a lot about Hong Kong cinema.
Pretty much. And Keanu Reeves movies.
Yeah. Rachel, I ask this every time, even though this was all about me this episode. What were you working on lately, and where can listeners find you?
So I don't know, I just blanked there for a second. You can find me on rachelkh.com, and all my socials are _RachelKH. In terms of what I've been working on, obviously we're at the end of the year, which is 2021, not 2022. And so best of lists are coming up. I helped Exclaim put together a few lists. So the first two that are up at the moment are best of film in 2021 and the best TV shows of 2021. So you can find that on exclaim.ca.
I can wholeheartedly recommend the best films list. I've already read through it all. It was a really fun one. I really like some of your picks that you and your coworkers made. I disagree heavily with some of them, but you know what? I won't belabor that point.
Which ones do you heavily disagree with? Like heavily disagree with?
Your number one pick, really.
Okay.
Which
fair.
I understand it's a music magazine, but we'll end up eventually getting to my thoughts of Summer of Soul, because I know you were pretty high on it.
Yeah, I really like that.
I'm not at all. I think the performances are great, but it's a very flawed movie.
Interesting.
But that is all completely besides the point. People should check that out. I'll link to that in the show notes for both of those lists for people to read, even though one of them is TV shows and this is a movie podcast. But I think I'll let it slide.
There's some really great TV shows too that have like Hollywood presence. Like first thing I thought of was Kate Winslet doing Mare of Easttown. So there's a bit of crossover, a little crossover. Midnight Mass,
sure.
The Mike Flanagan, who's a great horror director, did a great limited series.
Yep. But you can follow this show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. And if you agree or disagree with any of my picks, please let Rachel know and not me. You can send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. Thanks for checking this out.